Well, so far with these guys, the answer has been yes. As with like the plasma cutter here, to me, it's probably the best value plasma cutter. And I'm not just saying that because they sent it to me, it's because it just is. In the beginning, there were some concerns real quick on the plasma cutter, whether the tips are available. You can get these on Amazon. They actually also have them on their website, pretty reasonable. They are not expensive. And they last a bit longer than the cheap ones. And I was even experimenting cutting aluminum with it. Cuts it pretty much slag free. Pretty amazing machine. So they offered to send me this MIG welder, which is more than just a MIG welder. This is a multi-process welder, not just a MIG welder. So it does MIG, stick, I does some sort of TIG welding. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. I don't see I see a MIG torch. I don't see a TIG torch, but you know, honestly, I'm not going to really call it one if you wanted to use it for that, but you could use it for stick welding, which sometimes stick welding is kind of handy because if you're out somewhere where you can't carry your bottle around and you don't have any of the spools of wire for that, and you don't want to refeed the wire, you could just turn it on to stick and then do some welding somewhere remotely. And that's kind of a nice feature to have for basically, in my opinion, no additional cost. To me, you're getting a good MIG welder and you're also getting a stick as a bonus, and it also does, I think it's the type of TIG welding usually is, you know, you have to strike an arc and then TIG, so it's kind of funky. So I mean, as far as the TIG welder goes, I'm not going to really even look at it that way. I'm going to look at it as a MIG. Now, if you compare this to other welding companies, they're quite a bit more money for one that's a multi-process welder, and 220 and 110, which this one again is 220 and 110. So we're going to run it on 110 and we're going to see what it does on 110. So stick around and we'll see how well it works. I'd be surprised if it didn't work well, because honestly, the other things that I've seen, other videos that I've seen on this product seem to be pretty good, and I'm going to see what it is for me. And again, like I said, we were looking for another branded TIG MIG welder beside the local place, and it might be convenient, and some of you guys who are in other countries might be able to get this one and not be able to go to the local place and get one. Plus, I think it's actually a better value. Let's look at it. Well, so far, some of the things that I'm looking at are, this looks a lot better. They're not afraid to put their name on their torch, and it feels a lot more flexible than the other cheap ones that I've looked at. I know this might seem like it's trivial, but they even took the time to make the bags for everything with Ziplocs instead of just, you know, the cheapest thing they could get. So there's a lot of pluses here. The grounding clamp obviously is a little nicer than some of the cheap ones, and this is an inexpensive unit. So this is in with the cheap, you know, the price of the cheaper ones, and it's actually the quality of a little bit better, so you get a little bit more for your money, looks like to me so far. But we want to know how it welds, right? That's the biggest thing. That's what we're here for. I do notice one thing that is missing, that is not here, and I don't really expect it to be for the price point that this one is. It does not have one of these here, a flow gauge. So we'll use the one from my other machine, and we're going to put it up on the stand here and use it. And a lot of you guys are maybe going to start out with flux core, or even use it for sticks temporarily until you get the money to buy a gas bottle. So it's a stair step. You can start out with this and you can work your way in. And you know, those flow gauges on Amazon, or you can probably buy one from their website, probably about the same price, are like about 30 bucks on the average. It does come with a gas hose, so, but I don't see the other thing here anyway. And it does come with an adapter cord if you want to use 220. We're not going to do that. We're going to start it with 110, see how it works. Some of the other good things that I always look for on a cheaper unit are, does it have a metal feed system? This one here is a little bit trickier to get to because they didn't make the hole quite big enough. So you got to reach in here to loosen up to put your the correct. I'm going to pull this off real quick. We're going to make sure we have the correct one for, probably doesn't have flux core in it, and I do everything with gas. Probably has flux core reel in it, and it's, like I said, it's a little harder to reach. That wasn't really thought through too well, but it's not that bad. I mean, I can get in there and get it, so it's definitely doable. The size of it is definitely smaller than the other ones, which is nice. Size does matter. Smaller is better than big. Big units, you know, they take up a lot of your space in your garage. So let's see what reel we need. They came with both of them. And if you were looking at buying one of these, I would consider just getting some of the things like the spool of wire off their website. I thought it was a pretty good price. I'm not sure if they give you a discount on that, but they have the two different sizes. This is for the flux core, and this is for regular wire. I can tell by just looking at it because it's all smaller, and the bigger one has for the flux core. So like a box of these, I think the tips for the plasma cutter were like the same price on their website as it was on Amazon, and you could get that up with your order. You know, if you're going to buy one of these plasma cutters, you might want to just grab a set of consumables because they were pretty good priced on their website. For what it matters, it even comes with a funky little wire brush, and I think that's a flint on the end of there. So again, always the things to look for: big spool of wire, metal thing here, so that we should be able to fit a big spool on here. We'll get one on. Well, the first thing I noticed is the fan is really, well, it sounds like a wind tunnel. So it's putting out some pretty good wind. I don't know if that's good or bad. It's kind of loud. Let's turn it off and look at this for a second. Well, it took me a little while to figure out the settings on this thing, because it's definitely not your normal, you know, wire speed and heat. But you know, this thing for a beginner might be the way to go, especially if you haven't done much welding before, because I mean, I stitched that right there, and look how flat it is. I mean, and what it does is it has its own wire feed speed. So hopefully you guys can hear me over the thing, and I know we got a bunch of flashing stuff, but it's not flashing here. It's just the, you know, the video does that. What you do is you go here to your settings, and there's this little turnaround button, and you can switch it to thickness. So I went to the thinnest thickness, and I set it at that. And then while it's there, you can actually adjust the volts, or the thickness, I guess, but you can, it'll adjust the volts a little bit. So I go down to the lowest setting and left it there. Okay, and then you can go to inductance. I got that at 6. So you can adjust the inductance. I don't know if you can see the numbers moving up and down, but they're going up and down on this side over here. So and then there's this one. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to go to the manual and see what that is. Volts. I think, I don't know. It kind of has. I'm going to the lowest one. Maybe. Oh, you can go to minus on that. Let's see what it does. So I think what that does is that kind of regulates it. Yeah. So it'll even go lower voltage on the when you go to thickness. So what you're doing is you can adjust the volts even lower. You can like have a basic setting that you set it at. So like I had mine set at, what was it, I don't know, we'll just put it at 0, because that's like a factory setting, and that will give me 13.4 volts. But I had a little bit more than that, so I had 13.6 or 8 at the same thickness thing. So the thickness thing, but it doesn't give you a wire speed, which I don't know, maybe it does here. What the heck? Oh, that's the wire to feed the wire. Oh yeah, this will just feed the wire, so you can just push that and hold it to feed the wire so it doesn't run the welder. Okay, that's without reading the instructions. All right, let's try something a little trickier. Let's give it a pretty good sized gap. That's about a 16th, maybe a little bit more than a 16th gap, and let's see if it can weld through that. Well, I got to tell you, I was having a little bit of trouble trying to weld up the wider gap with this. But again, it came out really flat. So it's kind of cool that way. It does not use a lot of wire. This thing it's really for tight butt welding. It seems to be really good though. See, like this one, when I'm on a really low setting, I can just put those nice tight buttons down where it just looks really good. And look at the penetration on this. And that's really good penetration all the way through. I got one little void down here at the very end where I didn't quite make it all the way through, but I mean, that is pretty good. That's where I just started. I just didn't quite hold it long enough. So, like I said, this is a little messier. Trying to do wider ones but it's not hard. I get it. You know, the trick is on this thing is to let off the trigger. If you see it burn, just let off and then start triggering it until it welds it up. And I would say for a beginner, it's actually pretty good. I like the machine for that, because if you're new to welding, the settings are the #1 thing, that you're going to get wrong. And sometimes it's hard to know when to turn the wire speed up or turn it down. So this machine kind of does that for you. Well, let me do this. Let me go look into how to set that up and get the information correct in here. That's just me first opening up the box, just trying to figure it out myself. It's definitely not what I expected as far as things go. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not what I expected. I didn't expect to see one knob and all these buttons. So, I've got to figure out how to be able to manually set some things to correct, to make things different if I wanted to. Well, like I said, for somebody who doesn't know how to do that, you could pretty much turn this on. It's kind of hard to see it anyway when it's on, but if you just push this little revolving button here around until it goes to thickness, and then put in the thickness of metal that you want to weld, and go with the factory setting. And I think what you can do is you can go around to here, I think it was volts or amps, I don't know what those two are, but one of those, and you could actually dial that in to be plus or minus. So what that would do is kind of move where your settings are, so that maybe you like it slower or faster, or a little lower or less voltage or more amperage. You could kind of play with that up and down, and then it eliminates you from having to try and dial in your wire and dial in your heat and then playing with stuff to get it right. It just kind of does it, and it seems to do pretty good at doing that. So I think it's kind of cool for like a guy who doesn't know how to weld, first welder. Might be a little easier to learn that. Pulling the triggers is easy. It's getting the settings right is the key thing, and this kind of does it for you. All right, I'm going to show you guys the settings on how this thing works here. It's actually a lot more simple than most welders are, so hopefully it's not too noisy. Fan is kind of loud. The easiest way to do your settings on this, I know they're moving all over the place. Hopefully you can see it looks right for you on the video. But is to use this button here and go to thickness, okay? And it's all in metric, which is some of you guys is going to be a bummer, but you'll get used to it. So you can go to 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, and just see that number on the left, 1.4, 1.5. It's hard to see because it's flickering. Hopefully it's not doing that in the video, I don't know. But it is in the thumbnail while watching. Okay, is you go by the thickness. Okay, wow. And so on sheet metal, on like a VW, you're gonna want to be at like 0.6. Okay, it's less than a millimeter thick, or 0.7. And then the standard voltage on that is like 13.6, I think. Now, if you don't like that voltage, what you can do is you can move to, is it here? Yeah. To the where the V's flashing there. I have to do it while I'm looking at it. And you can go to plus up to, I think, 10 and minus 10. And then, so we're going to just leave it at 0, because what that does is that makes it so that, let's say you don't like the settings that it has at 0.6, you can bump it up to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or minus 10, and adjust the heat according to what you like. But I found that if you just run it right where it's at, it actually is pretty easy to use, so you don't have to worry about setting your wire speed and your heat and figuring all that out. The machine does that for you, and it actually comes out pretty good. So it's really good for the person who's never really welded before, because all you got to do is figure out how thick the metal is by metrics. So you can even measure it if you need to. But like VW metal is like so that's based on millimeters. That's not 2 millimeters thick. I know that's not right. Yeah, it normally is less than a millimeter thick. You can look up the material thickness. You can go, okay, this is 20 gauge, and look up, you know, what that is in metric. You kind of get used to that, and go on material thickness, and then put your two pieces together and weld it, and the machine will do the settings for you, just as long as you've got the right wire selected here, because you can select the wire by doing this. So this is the, now this is on 0.06 wire, the smallest one. So again, I was able to weld a really nice looking weld. Those are stitches, so I just did spot, 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 stacked them all together. And on this one, this isn't so nice looking because I had to gave myself a really wide gap, if you can see how wide that gap is. And what I did is I welded from this metal to the weld to this metal, so I kind of did a little U shape, and I didn't let it cool off long enough, so that was kind of my fault. And if I did that and let it cool and didn't let it cool, it would have done that just fine. And you can see down here where I kind of got a rhythm going of doing that, going across, and I didn't have any issues. And I was welding up a pretty good sized gap, and it worked pretty well. So let's try lap welding this piece on here just to see how it comes out. Sheet metal. Sheet metal is the hardest thing to weld, so it really makes that easy. And look at, I'm going to tell you, this is pretty cool, because look at how flat that weld is. It's nice and flat. We've got good penetration. You know, this is actually a really easy welder to weld with. It, for a person who's a newbie, even somebody who isn't, it's great for a hobby welder. I missed. But man, does that come out flat. So smooth, and just the ease of use is pretty good. I gotta tell you, it's just not what I was expecting at all. Let's try some dirty 1/8 inch plate. I'm just gonna throw a weld down here. Alright, so the closest setting it had was 3 millimeters, so it's 3.125 millimeters. So anyway, let's just do a bead on here and see how it works. Welding on wood is never a good idea, but it's what I got right now. So if you heard the sound of the welder, and as I got further down, you can see how it's melted in to the surface. It was penetrating pretty well. And you know, basically I didn't have to set the wire speed or any of that. It just does it. I was, like I said, I was expecting to see a welder that had wire speed and everything in it, and it just even made it easier. So this is kind of a neat setup, guys. I'm pretty impressed with this. Because it, you know, like I said, settings are everything when it comes to welding. Pulling the trigger and moving it, you know, doing little circles or moving it back and forth, that's easy. Getting the settings right is always the hard part, and it burned right through the rust that's on there. So yeah, this is a really cool welder. All right, let's just try buttoning this piece together. Alright, you guys saw it. I'm mountained up right here a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to clean this up real quick and take a look at it. I kind of missed there. That was my fault. But if you can see there, I was right on the butt. Let's get up closer. Right here, I was right on the butt. Then I missed right here. Probably because it's getting dark, I can't see very good. So that's what happens. This is normal, everyday life of welding. You know, this isn't like the welding channel where everything looks perfect and I'm sitting at a table on every weld. You know, you're welding on cars, you never have situations like that. You're always in compromised positions. Let's grind it down and take a look at it. So after grinding it down, of course, it looks pretty good. See that looks... There's no voids in there. I missed grinding at one little spot, but you can see that there's no pitting in there, really. And we were welding over this rusty metal, not even clean. Look at this side. That's pretty well penetrated. I missed a little bit down towards the end. I probably wasn't, or maybe the two sheets are lapped over a little bit, who knows. But you can see pretty good penetration. And I didn't have to set the wire speed, nothing. I just pull the trigger, set the metal size, and pull the trigger. So, okay, there's some different things to talk about here. So I got to tell you guys, I've never welded with a machine like this. I've never had one that did automatic wire speed, and in some ways it's kind of nice. You know, you don't have to do all that. Sometimes I really like to crank up the wire speed when I'm trying to fill something or something weird like that. And sometimes that's a benefit, but for most of your applications, this is going to be a whole lot easier for a lot of people. If you're you're brand new to welding, a machine like this could make it so much easier to learn, and you could get good results with this. You're not going to have to like learn the whole wire and speed and settings. Let's look at the other machine. Like on this thing here, I'd have to do, you know, your voltage, and you know, you got your voltage and you got your wire speed. And what happens is you think, okay, let me increase the voltage, and then you have to increase the wire speed, and then you go, well, the wire speed's too fast, and you're decreasing it. All that's eliminated. You don't have to deal with that. And it comes out pretty darn good. The results are pretty good. I mean, you know, it's probably at least as good as welder as I am. You know, I'm not the best welder, so I can't really tell you. I'm not like the table welding guy. I'm the guy that does the DIY car stuff, and this thing would do any of that stuff without having to think. All you do is you just look at your metal thickness and set it, and if you think it's too low, just turn it up to a thicker metal or turn it down to a thinner metal, and it'll probably be just fine. I mean, these welds right here were just so flat. I can grind that down in just a few seconds, and everything you're doing on automotive application, you're going to be grinding down and putting filler over everything. Nobody does stuff without any filler. They go, oh yeah, I don't use filler. Right? Everybody uses it. They just use less of it, and then they're bragging because they use less. And as long as it doesn't crack, why does it matter anyway? This is a nice looking, nice, flat, easy to grind weld. You know, I don't think I could even do it that flat by trying to do my own settings. Honestly, mine are lumpier than that for sure. And, you know, it eliminates some issues. Sure does make it easier. If you're a DIY guy and you don't know how to weld, I think this one would be a pretty good welder for you to start with. So like if you're looking at a gas welding situation, you want to learn how to gas weld, I'm sure this thing, I'm not going to use flux core in it. I don't have any flux core. I don't want to use flux core. It's just not my thing. Maybe you could start out with it with flux core. It does have settings for that. It does have automatic settings for that. And you could probably do whatever you want to do with flux core to start out, and then eventually get yourself a gas bottle and start out with a good welder that will automatically do the settings for you. I mean, that's pretty convenient. I'm not used to it. I'm not used to somebody else doing it for me. I always have to play with it myself, and you know, you don't have to do that with this thing. That's pretty cool. So I was telling my friend CT about it because he's still learning how to weld. I said, dude, man, We got to get these guys to send you one of these things and you can review it and see, because I think you could weld with this thing pretty easily and get everything pretty flat, because trying to figure out those settings, just go by the metal thickness, and then eventually you're going to want to play with that plus or minus thing and add more heat or less heat to it. Basically that's all you're doing by the plus or minus. You put the thickness in and then you add, +1 will give you a hotter heat, and -1 will give you a lower heat setting, and you just kind of play with that until it's where you want it to be. And I guess the wire is the same, the wire speed is the same. So like I said, it does it all for you. It's kind of easy. So if you want to push the easy button, might want to check out YESWELDER. This is different. This is not like I thought it was going to be. Check these guys out. And if you want a nice flat weld and you know how to weld yet, good place to start. Talk to you next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.